Hi everyone. As always, this is a quick overview video to talk about the tasks and the assignments in week 7. So here we are in week 7, if you can believe it, rapidly approaching, dare I say it, the end of the term. Last week we were able to not only learn about what makes good primary research, how to choose what primary research we're going to do. We actually designed our interviews or our surveys or our observations. And we also did a little bit of pre-writing. We began to pose the questions we want to ask about how our discourse community uses language or writing or literacy and discourse, basically how it uses these texts or literacy to achieve its goals. This week, in week 7, as you can see, we are going to, aside from our usual discussion boards, we are going to be doing another annotated bibliography and a primary research report. So we'll look, actually, I went over this assignment in more detail in a week 6 overview video, so I suggest you go and look at that for a little bit of more explanation. Revisit that video from week 6, the week 6 overview video, if you haven't yet, or if you'd like more information about this assignment. Basically, however, this assignment asks us to summarize some of the secondary sources that we think we're going to use, especially as we frame our research question, as we create our creating a research space model introduction. That will make more sense once we do the discussion boards this week and do this week's readings. But basically, the creating a research model, there are 3 steps, and this is a genre feature. We spent a lot of time discussing genre last week. The creating a research space model is a genre feature. John Swales, good old Swales, identified that almost all introductions in academic writing use these 3 steps, right? 1, they establish the territory. There are different ways you can do this, but basically they say, hey, here's what we know. Here's the conversation that's gone before. 2, these introductions say, well, here's what we don't know. Swales says they establish a niche, or they find a niche, right? Here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and then the 3rd step, however, is, of course, the 3rd step is to occupy that niche, to say, my research question will fill the gap in knowledge by doing X, Y, or Z. So although Swales presents the creating a research space in a little different way, it really maps on and jives really well with the way we've been talking about argument, scholarly inquiry, scholarly research as a conversation. Swales says this is how all academics in one way or another start their research projects. They say, hey, here's what we know. Sometimes this section is its own section in its own right, called the review of literature. But right, the first step is like, hey, here's what we know. Here's what's been said about my topic. This is really, really similar to what we've talked about when we talked about entering the conversation before. We need to do this, 1, to establish our own ethos, 2, so that the reader gets a little bit of background about it, and 3, so that the reader knows how our inquiry will actually move the conversation forward. So step 1, hey, here's what we know. Smith and Jones have said X, Y, and Z. Step 2, establish that niche. Tell us what we don't know. Tell the reader what knowledge hasn't been created yet, or where there's a gap in knowledge. Although Smith and Johns know a lot about X, Y, and Z, very little has been researched about A. And then the 3rd step, naturally, is just to say, my research question will explore how right? How your research question, how your inquiry fits into the conversation that's gone before. That's the basis of the CARS model. So as we read Brannick, especially in the discussion board, I'm going to ask you to be on the lookout for these moves. Where do we see Brannick create this create a research space for himself. Aside from our usual week 7 discussion board, post and reply, and aside from the annotated bibliography and primary research report, where you will actually have the secondary and the primary research that will need to begin our project. We will then, by Sunday, have a draft. I'm asking you by Sunday to complete a draft of the Discourse Community Report. This is really similar to the draft we did earlier on. Of course, what we need to know is this is technically worth 0 points, but we must submit a draft on time so that we can be placed into peer review groups, so that we can earn 50 points when we do give that good peer review. And I can't let you turn this draft in late because, as you can see, we're going to turn this in on Sunday, and then as soon as Wednesday of week 8, the peer review is due. So we really need to be timely about the Discourse Community Report draft. In some of the previous drafts we wrote, they were hardly drafts, closer to outlines. Students often ask me, how long does my draft have to be? And I say something annoying like, well, the longer and more thorough and closer to a final draft that a first draft is, the more helpful and specific peer feedback can be. Very, very true answer. I also know students find it annoying. So my rule of thumb is that it should be around, try to get it to be around 3/4 of the final length of the draft. So in our case, that's anywhere from 1,500 to 1,800 words. Aside from creating that draft, and also before I move on, for Sunday we're reading some annotated student samples. These are going to be really helpful for you to see what it looks like when a student really nails this assignment and actually produces an argument and primary research that moves the conversation forward. So really, I strongly encourage you to read these, not just for the discussion board, of course, where you'll need to use them, but to sort of see, maybe to model, if you like that term, what your Discourse Community Report can look like as you create this first draft of it. Our last task for week 7 is to sign up for revision plan conferences. We'll go over the conferences in more detail in week 8. What we can see now is that the latter half of week 8 and the earlier half of week 9, we're not reading anything. We're not doing our discussion boards. We're not having class, so to speak. We are only going to have, you are going to have one-on-one conferences with me to discuss your draft, the feedback you've gotten, and the revision plan, the best way to move forward. Then you'll have that revision plan, and we can march confidently towards December 2nd, when the Discourse Community Report is due. So we'll be having these conferences via Zoom, of course. We're going to have these conferences on November 19th, Thursday, Friday, November 20th, Monday, November 23rd, and Tuesday, November 24th. So all you need to do by the end of this week is to look at your calendar, find a 20-minute block that you think works for you, and then sign up using this Discourse Community Report sign-up sheet. I'll also need you to enter your first and last name, your section number, and then using this drop-down menu, choose a 20-minute block somewhere within those 4 days that you can sit down with me via Zoom, and we'll chat for 20 minutes about the best revision plan moving forward. A note: these will, as students select them, they should disappear. So it's possible that if you sign up really late, there won't be a whole lot of options. I'm going to ask you to, this is a big time constraint on my time, as not my time but my scheduling, as well as it is on yours. I really think it's worth it. So I'm really going to ask you to try to find one of the slots that is in this drop down box. If it absolutely isn't going to work, if there's absolutely no time available in this drop down box, send me an email, let me know. We can find a time, I'm sure. So you will have gotten a lot done by the end of week 7. By the end of week 7, you'll have mostly the secondary sources you need. Hopefully, you'll have a lot of the primary research that you'll need. You'll have the knowledge of how to write an introduction that creates a research space that really shows why your research matters and how it's actually going to move the conversation forward. These annotated student samples are really going to give you more examples of what it looks like to write an introduction like that, and to write a methods section. This might be the first time for many of us that we are asked to actually detail our methodology. These are great samples of what it looks like to write a paper that does a more formal CARS introduction, has a methods section, says basically, here's how I conducted primary research and why, that has a section which reports the primary research, hey, here are my findings, and has a section that, a discussion or an analysis, but a section that actually takes that primary research, takes that data, and uses it to answer that question. And then, there's usually some sort of a conclusion. So these are really helpful examples for you as you try to create a discourse community report assignment that, I realize for many of this that this is maybe the first time creating a paper that, actually does primary research, actually does its own research to answer its own questions. I realize that. So that's why I think these student samples are really helpful for us as we give that a go for the first time in this draft of the Discourse Community Report. And of course, you'll have signed up for our revision plan conferences coming in week 8 and week 9. Great. Hang in there. Good luck this week. We're really making a lot of progress. We only need to keep our nose to the grindstone for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and we're home free. So hang in there, and as always, feel free to contact me with any questions whatsoever.